everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Alder Hour, your favorite way to end your working day. I'm Matt Alder from Recruiting Future, and the Alder Hour is part of the Purple Acorn Network. So head over to purpleacornnetwork.com after the show if you want to find out more about all the other great shows that are on this particular network. You can also follow Purple Acorn on LinkedIn, which is probably the best way to get all of the shows live as they happen. Now, this show is also available as a podcast wherever you get your quality podcasts. So you can listen to us in audio, you can watch us live, you can watch us on YouTube, all of these fantastic things. Now, we are very much live if you're watching us live. So please feel free to leave us some comments. We'll try and get them on the screen and join in the conversation because we've got some really interesting topics that we are talking through today. Now, no show last week, partly because I was ill. So I'm fully recovered from a horrible case of man flu and delighted to be back doing the show again this week. So I would like to welcome this week's co-host. And it's Mervyn Dinnan. Hello, Mervyn. How are you doing?
Hello. I'm good, Matt. I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good. So normally we'd have Rona and Jocelyn co-hosting the show with me. They are both not here next week, not here this week, even if I can get my time zones right. However, you have boldly stepped in to cover both of their roles. So it's good to have you. Just in case there's anyone watching who doesn't know who you are, just give us a quick intro. I know who you are, but just for
yeah, you know who I am.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm Mervyn. I'm an HR tech kind of analyst, content creator, speaker, writer, all those kind of things. I also co-host a podcast on the Purple Acorn Network called From X to Z. My co-host Danielle Farage is not around this week. She's busy, and so I've stepped in here. That's very intergenerational, the conversations we have. Today will be a bit different. And Matt and I have co-authored 2 books and a number of research papers over the years.
Absolutely. And I don't know if you're watching, if you can see just in the background there's a pile of our books. There we are, exceptional talent and digital talent. So both still available on Amazon or wherever you buy your books. Anyway, enough of that. Let's get into the first segment. So time for Points and Pints. Our choice, and we review a couple of articles that we've seen in the news this week. Now, my beverage of choice this week is this particular beer. So this is a Scottish beer. I had this a couple of weeks ago. The trouble is, whenever I buy these, they come in packs of 4 and they sit in my office. So I tend to have the same one 3 or 4 weeks in a row. But I really like this one. So this is Joker IPA, and it's Joker AF because it's alcohol free. And yeah, I'll be opening that in a second. Mervyn, have you brought a drink to Points and Pints? What do you have for us?
I have. I live in leafy southwest London, and so I am sipping Prosecco.
Very good.
Fresh net Prosecco, because that's the way we do it down in southwest London.
Absolutely. So all the way from Italy to southwest London. Right. Let me open this. I can never find the camera for these things. Let me open my. You ever come across this one, Joker IPA?
I've seen it. I've seen it. I haven't tasted it.
It's very nice actually. It's quite it's quite hoppy, I think is the word I was looking for there. So the alcohol-free version is pretty good. It's a pretty good representation of the alcohol version. So I would recommend that one. There we are.
I will check it out.
Scrap the Italian stuff, buy Scottish. That's my tip for the day. Right. Let's get the first headline up. Here we go. Right. This is really interesting. And we've got the 2 stories that we've got this week. They both kind of relate to each other. So we'll kind of sort of flow into one from the other. So this one, the US job, this was in The Guardian. The US job market is yet to be seriously disrupted by AI, finds a Yale study. Now, this was a study where I believe they looked at things like I think they looked at payroll data or something to look at changing job titles and those kind of things. So really interesting, interesting kind of methodology. And what they found is that there's been no discernible disruption to jobs or job types since ChatGPT was launched in November 2022. So this kind of runs against a lot of the narrative that's out there that says, people are losing their jobs because of AI. AI is changing the world of work really, really quickly. And it would kind of appear that it isn't. Mervyn, what do you think? What's really going on here?
Um, well, AI is changing the world of work. I mean, I think anybody listening to this, knows from the day to day what they do, how they operate, how they work. There is an element of AI in a lot of what we do, and this this is one of those things. It's a bit like if you and I go back a long time to the advent of social media. In the early days of Twitter and things, it was kind of nothing to see here. This isn't going to change anything. Social media has been around for 2 years and everybody's still communicating the old way, and they still write emails to each other, and nobody tweets anybody with information. And there's always, I suppose, it's that kind of, when something new is gaining traction, it's kind of, the first thing we have to do is kind of make out, wow, this is fantastic, this is changing the world. Then it's not really changing the world. Actually, everything's pretty much the way it used to be. And then gradually individual people going about their business notice changes, and that's when you begin to get that slow build from ground level of people saying, hey, this is all beginning to change a bit now. And I think that's where we are. But I think that in the clickbait era, which we're still in, you need headlines like everything is changed because of AI, and nothing has changed because of AI.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a really interesting reality check actually because a couple of weeks ago we were at HR Tech. You were there, and
Yes.
HR Tech was just a bubble of technology innovation. So there were literally so many AI agents. They were kind of running up and down the running up and down the spaces between the booths. So all the innovation there, really interesting stuff. There were case studies as well. It wasn't just people sort of talking theory, some great case studies. And I think if you kind of walked into that room and that was your only exposure to AI in our industry, you'd think that every single company was using it and it was changing the world really, really quickly. A week later, I went and did a presentation to a group of large employers, and no AI being used at all, very little knowledge about some of the things that perhaps we've sort of taken for granted that people understand, and a kind of reality check about where we are. And I think the thing about this is it does take things things take a long time to change, and no matter how fast the technology is evolving, there is that human kind of barrier, that organizational barrier, the whatever that is around adoption or regulation or fear, or just the change cycles within organizations, that it doesn't come through as quickly as perhaps we think. However, and this is a very big however, I think that we have seen enough to know that this is going to fundamentally change lots of things about work. And I think that we're going to see those kind of changes running in quicker and quicker. What's really clear about this is faster adoption and development than social media, faster adoption and development than mobile, faster adoption and development for the internet. So that has consequences. So we will see change, but it will take a little while to kind of show up on things like this. Now, the other aspect is if you look at the media and all the announcements that companies are putting, the layoffs that companies are making, every single mass layoff now seems to be accompanied with, we're going to lean more on AI, or it's because of AI, or we're looking for efficiencies with AI. And sometimes the language is quite carefully couched, and it's just like we're looking to use AI, not we're replacing people because of AI. But it seems that for many organizations, that's just a really convenient excuse to tag on to layoffs that probably have more to do with the economic situation than the technology situation. I mean, what's your perspective on that aspect of it?
Well, there were two things that came to mind. The first one is that you're spot on. Yeah, whenever there is an economic slowdown for whatever reasons, there's always something to blame other than the economic slowdown. So, I mean, that is from time immemorial. There's always been something else to blame, and so it's very easy rather than say we're finding things difficult at the moment, and so our customers aren't buying as much, we're not as profitable as we were, so we've got to make some layoffs. It's AI. It's because of AI we don't need as many people. And I, as anybody who has seen me on the X to Z podcast with Danielle knows, that I will go back to my early days as a trainee accountant when there was horror amongst the established accountants, that people were saying, one day we'll be doing all this on a computer. And it was like you can't take that. No, you won't do computers. You don't trust them. They're ridiculous. So in those days, they were huge mainframe things. We won't be doing it like that. But of course, ultimately we were, and nobody thought that something that size would actually be what we were using for most of it. So technology always changes and advances, and we adapt and change with it, but it will always get blamed for something that people want to cover up.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And also I think what we can learn from the way that technology develops is, AI can do some absolutely incredible things, but actually sometimes getting it to do stuff is quite clunky. People are sort of building their own workflows. It can take a little bit of time to do it. Companies that are building AI into their systems, there are all kinds of considerations. I did a whole kind of content film series filmed it with Smart Recruiters a couple of weeks ago when I was at HR Tech, just looking at everything that went into building the system that they have, and it's an extraordinary effort and really, really complex to do. So I think we have to take that into account as well. Even though the results can be incredible, you can just write stuff in ChatGPT and it tells you things or it does things for you. It's still not instantly easy. I can't even say that word. You know what I mean? It's still can be difficult to implement. However, that's going to change. I mean, I think when you were sort of showing your iPhone there, that kind of illustrates. Ultimately, this technology kind of sits in the background. The user interface has changed, and also I think our expectations as human beings are always hilarious. I think when we first saw Gen AI technology a couple of years ago, it was magic. It was like, this is incredible, and now I find myself just shouting at it because it's not doing what I want to do quick enough. So I think that's the other aspect of it. Cool. Okay, well, let's move on to the next article because it is kind of related to this theme. So Stripe's head of AI says she's hiring more new grads than ever, but she fears a mentorship crisis. Again, this is really interesting. There has been a huge narrative out there about AI taking entry-level jobs, early careers jobs. And I've seen a number of commentators and media outlets and everyone saying with absolute certainty that this is happening. Now, interestingly, there are a lot of counter bits of evidence to this that says, actually, some companies are hiring more graduates or more early careers people. And again, is it the economic situation? Because people always always reduce their early careers hiring in times of kind of negative economic circumstances. So again, this is interesting from that perspective because they're hiring more graduates than ever. So I wonder whether the same effect is in play here. It also raises a really serious issue because it's fairly clear that, and I've read a number of other reports about this week, that entry-level jobs are the jobs that AI is coming for first, and this is what the Stripe's head of data and AI doesn't actually give her a name, I don't think, in this article, so we'll just have to call her that. Says that there is this mentorship crisis. It's like, how, as AI takes more of the tasks away, maybe not necessarily the jobs, but the tasks, how do people learn? How do they come into organization? How do they learn as AI starts to kind of absorb these jobs? Where is our pipeline for the future? Now, I know this is something you've kind of talked about quite a lot, but give us your take on it all.
AI will teach them.
Good answer.
Yeah.
Moving on. No, carry on.
Well, it's simple as that. You just go to AI and say, "How do I do this?" Oh, yeah, that's how I do it.
Yeah.
No, again, there's always, as I say, I go back, to computerization in early days, and it's like none of us will have jobs because it'll all be computers. There will always be work for humans to do. We will still, we are. The human race is human. I know that's nothing earth-shattering there, but it's kind of we're here. We need to communicate. We need to kind of bond. We need to do things together. We have families. We have it's kind of it's difficult to, I suppose, to try and explain it. And I've been thinking about this afternoon because I knew we were going to discuss it. And it's just the way it is. We will always find new ways to do things. We will always find new things for people to do. The technology will do some things, and I suppose my concern is in terms of thinking and strategic thinking and things like that. If we allow like AI, or we get AI to do a lot of that kind of stuff, then are we going to lose those kind of cognitive skills? So there could be some drain of cognitive skills as we go through over the next maybe 2 or 3 generations. But that something else will take its place. Humans are adaptable.
Yeah, I think the other interesting thing in this article is this particular person is mainly hiring PhDs and loves taking them straight out of university because there's fresh thinking. They know how to use the most up-to-date tools, all of those kind of things. So they're actually desirable skills that they're kind of bringing into the workforce there, which I think is kind of another thing as we get this kind of new, newer technology in, people who are kind of more native to it. That's always an advantage. I suppose my concern is that things are going to change, and tasks are going to be taken away, jobs are going to be taken away, and I wonder whether the whole infrastructure around early careers is going to be able to change quick enough to adapt to that. So, the way universities prepare people for work or don't prepare people for work, the way schools, teach, the way that early careers is structured, and the expectations around what graduates and apprentices do are very long established things. In some ways, they've not changed in decades, if not hundreds of years, perhaps. And I just wonder whether work and education can adapt quick enough to be able to make sense of what is potentially just turning everything on its head.
I would agree with that. I think that the establishments take a long time to change. Individuals can change a lot quicker, but I think organizations, establishments, hierarchies, structures take time to change. Because they take years and decades to build up, and kind of it's kind of that they don't disappear overnight, but things change. And I think that what we'll begin to find is that kind of early careers learning will be done differently. So that that there are the old expression that I often use is kind of, it used to be called sitting next to Nelly. That's an old English expression. Basically, you started a job, you sat next to Nelly, you watched what she did, and then you did it. And that's how people learned. Now, that has obviously changed a lot over the last 30, 40 years, I'm guessing. That's a very old expression. I mean, it was old when I started in the workplace. So it was, but that's the way, I mean, generations had grown up by just kind of watching what more experienced people did and then doing it themselves. And I think what we have here is that we have a younger generation who probably are much more adept and skillful at handling the technology than the generation above them. So that will be, almost like that's a job there. for early careers people. You're very good with these computer things. You're very good with this AI thing. Can you do this? Can you design us this? Can you do that? So there will always be something. There will always be something to do, and this the symbiosis, if you like, between different generations. We'll always find somewhere in the middle. I think that for the generations that are coming into the workplace now, yes, there will be problems, and on Ecstasy we talk about it. There's a lot about people might have heard of a book called Inheritocracy, which is about the emerging Gen Z and after Gen Z generation, and how they're unable to structure their lives financially the way certainly their parents did and generations before that. So there's a lot around that as well, which has got nothing to do with what we're talking about at the moment, but it's another one of those complex areas. And AI is really, all of this is within that. The world is changing. Everything is advancing very quickly. And we don't yet have a specific, we don't have the answers yet, because we need things to develop and settle. And this is how AI is going to be used. This is the perfect use case in human resources for AI. That kind of thing is still evolving.
Yeah, I suppose as a final point on this, there's also a piece where some companies will stop hiring at entry level because AI does the task, they don't need to. And, in some ways, there's always kind of been this collective responsibility around early careers hiring, that everyone's kind of building a pipeline of professionals for the future. And we kind of seen it before with recessions in certain industries. So, for example, the oil and gas industry, there was a big recession. They stopped hiring. 5 to 10 years later, they didn't have a pipeline of people to fill certain roles because they hadn't kind of hired them in. And I guess we're kind of really at risk of that as well, if that we're not sort of bringing kind of younger people, early careers people kind of through. Is there a point where there is this kind of gap where you need someone with lots of experience to do a job and they're just not there?
Very conceivably. But then we'll adapt.
Yeah.
The job won't get done as well as it could be done, but it'll get done.
AI will tell us what to do. I think that's my new mantra. AI will just tell us.
I wanted to say that, but I mean, I thought...
Exactly. So really, really interesting stuff. And it's good to see, some kind of different research and different points of view from the established narrative of, there are no graduate jobs ever again. And AI is already responsible for millions of, hundreds of thousands of layoffs. And it's good to get kind of a bit of a different perspective on that. So two really interesting articles.
And also the way we think about careers will change as well. I mean, I posted something up in my newsletter a few hours ago, and that was very much about, again, different careers, the way that Gen Z in particular are looking at this, and the options open are quite different to what they would have been a few years ago. So I think everything will adapt. How long it takes to adapt is obviously, we don't know. But I mean, everything evolves eventually.
Yeah, I mean, and also, everyone's got access to this kind of technology. There are probably 10-year-olds there who are currently building, the world's next HR software because they can. So they'll just take over the world. But anyway, right. Thank you, Mervyn. You will be back later to talk about another topic. But in the meantime, let's talk to our guest. Hi, Kamaria, and welcome to the show.
Hello. How are you?
Very good, thank you. It's a pleasure to be talking to you. Could you, just to start with, introduce yourself and tell everyone what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Kamaria Scott. I am the founder and CEO of Anetic, a boutique consultancy that helps organizations make sure that their people leaders can lead engaged, healthy, and high-performing teams. Beyond that, I'm an IO psychologist, I'm a performance strategist and a coach. I host the Manager to Manager podcast, and you can find me speaking about all topics manager-related and future work-related.
Fantastic. Well, as I say, it's brilliant to be talking to you. We're actually here. We're not talking about you, we're talking to you. And so let's talk about really what's kind of going on in the workplace today. So all these kind of phrases get thrown around, quiet quitting, rage applying, just every week there seems to be a different kind of spin on it. What's kind of happening in the workplace? Is there kind of a real sort of, even though we're many years now away from the pandemic, this kind of post-pandemic shakeup about how people think about work or how they employees relate to their managers? What's your take on it?
So, my take is that we are probably continuing a journey that started a while ago. So, I think we have that. I think we've arrived at quiet hugging as the last quiet. So, I think by the time we
That
originally
was the
started
one I couldn't
preparing
think of.
for
Yeah,
this,
quiet
it was
hugging.
here we are now. Pandemic was quiet quitting. I think we've had a couple quiets in between, then and now we're at quiet hugging.
Right.
But all of that is to really say that I think the overarching relationship that people have to work is changing and has continued to change when we look back to probably our parents' generation and the whole concept of psychological safety and employee value proposition, there was this sense of loyalty to an organization. There was this exchange that said, if you take care of me in your younger years, I'm going to take care of you in your older years. And there was this like win-win situation. So when we talked about loyalty, there was this idea that you would get a job and you would stay there until you retired. My father has had two jobs. He was in the Navy for 20 years. He worked for another company for 20 years. And then he kind of peddles around Home Depot every now and then. But literally, that was it, right? And that was the model that so many people knew. And then we saw some very interesting things happen as the things that signaled care started to go away. One of them I always talk about in the US is the erosion of pensions, right? So there used to be this thing there where we had defined compensation toward your retirement. And so you knew what that was going to look like. And then we shifted to defined contribution where we were saying, no, you're going to save for your own retirement. And things like that started to almost fracture the relationship, or that understanding of mutually taking care of each other started to change. So before the pandemic, the one that I always like to really talk about was the major shift when I was growing up was Enron. I don't know if you're familiar with Enron and
Yeah.
that whole big scale. Okay, so you're familiar, right? And nothing says we don't value you like, throwing away your retirement, right? And so you really start to see people say, okay, maybe we're not all in this together. Maybe this is not, I'm taking care of you, you're taking care of me. And so the attitudes toward work started to shift even back then. So by the time we got to the pandemic, I think what we actually saw, if you go back by Gallup's research, was we saw a little bit of an uptick in the engagement and sentiment toward employers, because during the pandemic, employers were showing care to their employees because this crazy wild thing was happening. So when we were actually in the pandemic, we saw a raise in people's engagement and perceptions of loyalty and care from the organization. And now we're sort of sliding back in the other direction, I think, with AI, because as you said in your previous segment, every other Tuesday, some CEO is on the news talking about laying off people in favor of hiring their favorite AI agents. And then I think you even had AT&T, the CEO of AT&T, come out a few weeks ago and say, this business of rewarding loyalty is over. If you're either aligned with our mission or you're not. So I think, from there, my internal headline was employee engagement is dead and we're probably all better off for it, because now we're at a point where we're having a real conversation about the exchange of work.
Mm, mm. And do you think that, because again, kind of thinking back through my career, I'm sure at least every year for the last 20 years, someone's told me that employee engagement is at its lowest point ever and it's a crisis. So it's something that has been evolving over a long time. Going back to something that we said earlier, do you think also that economic cycles are to do with this? Because it always does seem that companies are, going out of their way to kind of hire and retain people. And then when there's a sense that people, don't have as many choices, then that they kind of, double down on the other side of it. Do you think that's a part of it as well?
I think so. When organizations find that there are more positions than there are skilled employees, they get really nice, right? It's a classic supply and demand, right? And so even if you think about like toward the end of the pandemic, when we saw a lot of people leaving the workforce unexpectedly. So there were a lot of people that's retired. There's a lot of women that dropped out of the workforce that simply did not come back. And so you did see more positions than qualified employees. You saw a little bit of that, pre the 2008, crash here in the US. And so I think when people are like, oh no, we really need people, employee engagement efforts step up. Then when you find yourself in a different situation where maybe there are more qualified employees than there are jobs, the sentiment changes. And does that align with kind of what we see economically? Probably, right?
Mm.
But it kind of turns into a very need-based relationship. And I treat you better when I need you more than when I
Yeah.
perceive that I have the upper hand. But obviously, the downside to that is employees have memories. And so it continues to erode the relationship because we never see it again. We never see that. We never see work and the relationship to work the same again as we did
Yeah.
before it happened.
Yeah. And what else is it that's kind of eroding trust that the workers have or used to have in their employer? What else is kind of going on? What are the other sort of key factors in play here?
I think for me, it's always layoffs.
Mm.
I think that is one. I think we've gone through a series of layoffs, and it's not always the layoff in and of itself that erodes trust. It's also how you go about doing the layoff. So I've seen layoffs that have been done extremely well. And I always tell people like I've been on the receiving end of three of them, and I always call it like a tale of three layoffs because there's been a time where employees are you walk into the building and the door is locked and you don't work here anymore, and that's very jarring to someone. But then there's been instances where employers will say, hey, a layoff is coming, I want you to know that 3 months from now you won't work here anymore, and here's what we're doing. So there's an issue of the dignity with which we do things and how we treat people when we are separating them that I think is really, really important.
Mm.
I think the other part of that is even kind of this conversation about return to office. So when we think about what we have seen from how people have discussed the ability to have flexibility in their life, to be able to balance both their personal and professional lives and what flexibility has done for them, it doesn't seem to resonate why there's a push to get back in the office when they've successfully shown that they can manage their lives and their work at a distance. So without a strong rationale other than because we want it that way, that's what that signals is that I'm actually not interested in what you need to be personally successful. It's what I need to be personally successful. And I think it's important to say this. I think it was Jamie Dimon who had this, was talking about it with his brand new return to office. They put all this money back into the investment of the building. But my immediate question was, did you ask people if they want to come back? People don't want to live in the office anymore, right?
Yeah.
So it's the sort of disregard for what you're hearing people say they need and want to make their lives work in favor of what the organization wants. And I think what we are seeing with younger generations is just a general unwillingness to wrap themselves around employers
Yeah.
and put the employer's needs first above their own.
Yeah, absolutely. I think some of the return to the office stuff has almost been jaw dropping in terms of that disconnect between the situation, not even what employees necessarily want, but their situation. It's like I've moved 100 miles from the office, or I'm now, I've spent the last 5 years taking my child to school, or or whatever it is. It was just just I say sometimes just jaw-droppingly extraordinary that some of the things that were kind of going on there. So what is it that companies can kind of do to kind of rebuild this trust? Because no matter what the economic situation and the layoff situation, retention is really important. There is talent scarcity in so many different areas. If that kind of, if that sort of contract is finally broken of that, we're all one big family, or, you need to be loyal to us, we'll be loyal to you. That's obviously a thing of the past. So what is it that employers can do to kind of rebuild trust, or, just do things in a different way?
I think what is so interesting about the psychological contract is the fact that it was a shared agreement, right? Not necessarily what the agreement was, but that it was a shared agreement that everybody sort of knew the operating parameters. And so I think the opportunity now is to have a really honest conversation about what work is supposed to be for people and what is the current version of a win-win situation. So this notion that I am sort of pretty fond on right now is the idea of exchange over extraction. I think
Okay.
for a lot of people, work has started to feel like extraction. And even when we talk about AI and we talk about, making sure that we are turning over all of our knowledge to the company so they can use it far beyond when we work there. That is pure exchange over extraction. And I think employees are getting wise to that point and understanding that they can actually monetize their skill sets on their own. So, from a technological perspective, I can do something for you, or I can do it for me. The same technology and AI that's helping you be successful is also helping individuals be successful. So, we've got to figure out like what's the value proposition if I'm going to now forego the opportunity to monetize on my own to come work for you. And so I think bringing that back to the table is to really think about what is it that people want that's going to help them be successful. That's personal development. It's networks that will help them grow. It's transferable skills. So there's not this need to go back to really rich benefit plans, this notion of forever. I think they're more invested. People today are more invested in today.
Mhm.
What are you going to do for me today that's going to allow me to invest in my future tomorrow? And that for a lot of them is transferable skills. It's projects that are interesting. It's the ability to use, again, AI to sort of learn some of these things that maybe one day they are going to use for themselves. I think it's also letting go of this notion that we own employees fully and requiring them to put all their eggs in one basket, which frankly has holes in the bottom. So I think we have to rethink the entire relationship and think about how do we create a fair exchange today that allows both parties to take care of themselves on their own in the future.
Absolutely, and I suppose I was reading an article over the weekend about I don't think this is a big trend, but a kind of a trend, particularly in sort of tech startup companies, where they're making people work 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, and that's kind of the norm. What's going on there? Do you think that that we could see things going in the other direction, that the employers could be more exploitative like that?
That's a good question. I mean, an employer can technically, yes, they could be, but what I would wonder is what does that do to your actual ability to hire people who want to come and do that,
Yeah.
right? And what I mean by that is increasingly there's the ability to figure out what is it that you're really good at, what skills do you have, and then what is it that do you need the company to be able to bring those things to life and to make money. So in those instances, my question would be, are those startups where those young people are thinking about the equity that they're going to get, and so they're
Yeah.
willing to work those 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, because they know at some point this company is going to be sold, and whatever I've been granted is going to be worth $1 million, right? Like, I recall, I always tell people my origin story starts at AOL and back in like 1997. And I practically lived there. I worked in a call center. But listen, janitors left their millionaires, right?
Yeah.
Because as
Yeah.
it was starting up, they were being granted stock options. And so, when it sold, when they were like, they left there as millionaires. So if there's somebody that says, listen, I am willing to work this 12-hour day, 6 days a week, because I think this company's going to be worth it, and one day I'm going to be a millionaire. That's perfect. You know why? Because that's the win for them. They've
Yeah. Of
identified
course.
the win. Now,
Absolutely.
as a 40-something-year-old, that's not my ministry, right? I'm not doing it. And there are other people who are saying that's not for me. The
Yeah.
idea is that there is choice. And if you are somebody who's really clear about the value proposition, listen, it's going to be hard when you work here. I remember earlier in my career going on an interview for one of the big four. And she said, we work a 60-hour minimum, minimum. I said, girl, this is not for me.
Yeah.
I think the most important part here is the transparency of the exchange. What
Yes.
you mentioned earlier, as we started talking about, we're all a family, or even the conversation that we typically have around employee engagement. It's a dishonest conversation.
Mm.
It's not being
Mm.
honest about the actual exchange that's happening, and that one side kind of benefits more than the other, and that doesn't allow people to opt in or opt out in a way that fits their life the best way.
Yeah, and I think also that we've kind of learned more and more about how humans function, because happy employees who've had enough sleep, whose brains are kind of working the optimal way, are always going to be more productive, particularly in a world where AI is taking away repeatable tasks and humans are going to have to perform at a kind of a more cognitive level. It just kind of seems to make sense from that perspective?
It really does. And I think when we can think about, again, what's the dynamic, or the thing that typically happens between, I think, employers and employees, and why the shift happens, is that for the longest time, the only way to sort of really have some sort of stability was to work for an organization. And the barriers to entrepreneurship and self-employment were really, really high. But think about the young people who are like, you know what, I'm going to be a content creator. Never mind. I'm going to be a contractor, right? For every technology that we have, it's almost like the barrier to not working for an organization is coming down. And so, like, are there perks? Yes. Is it fun to do it with other people? Sure. But I am seeing in my own circles more networks of individuals working together where we're sort of all independent, but we support and help each other with the execution. Somebody might win a project and we figure out how we bring other people in, right? And so I think what we're seeing now is viable alternatives to being a W-2 employee on payroll. And that does not mean, you're going to be destitute or living under a bridge. And I think the rise of that will at some point have organizations think out the value proposition of being on payroll. Because even with technology, you still need that human aspect. You still need employees. It's not a switch that we're flipping, but you are going to find that the people who you want to retain, those high performers, they're going to either figure out ways to do it for themselves, or you're still going to have to compete for those people to keep them, loyal and working for your organization.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for talking to me. Really interesting conversation. Thank you. Awesome. So let's move on to our final segment, which is trending or ending. Welcome back, Merv. How you doing?
I'm good. What a fascinating conversation.
I was going to say, any takeaways for you from that?
Just everything's, the constant state of flux. Everything's changing. Everything's evolving. You never know what you're going to wake up to the next morning.
Absolutely. So anyway, trending or ending. Rona does this brilliantly, but unfortunately she can't be with us this week. So I'm going to have to try and do it as well, or half as well. So what we do is we take a topic and we explore it and we decide whether it's trending or whether it is ending. So this week's topic is AI interviews. And this comes from an article that we saw. There's quite a lot of feedback that we've spotted on places like Reddit, with people complaining about AI interviews, saying they're impersonal. The company's trying to steal my data. I don't want a computer to say no to me. I demand to speak to a human. We're going to boycott all of these, all of these kind of things. So there's quite a lot of negativity about AI interviews, in general out there. But I think there are a few interesting things here, because that doesn't seem to correspond with what the vendors say about these interviews. I mean, what always comes back is that people are really glad to take them because it allows them more flexibility. It makes the recruiting process move quicker. All of those kind of things. I did an interview with Daniel, the CEO at Greenhouse at HR Tech, a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about this. And he said, even though he didn't necessarily think it was a good thing, AI interviews are inevitable as they kind of scale up. So some interesting different sides to the story. What do you think? What's your take on this? I've got some ideas, but I'm just interested to know where you stand to start with.
I think that the whole area of interviewing is one of those things over the years. I go back my entire working life. I was an accountant, as people who know me will know. I then spent a long time in kind of like recruiting and HR. So very much interviewing was part of what I did every day. And I think that interviewing is one of those things. Somebody once said to me that and I'm sorry, it was a woman who said it to me, said, no man will ever admit that they are a bad interviewer. every interviewer I've come across, whether it's been like a client that I've recruited for, whether it's a company I've worked in, is always kind of, they've got the set questions. I know how to get information out of people. I know how to find out if they can really do something, and it almost becomes not a game, but it's kind of like it's the people who think that they're very good interviewers often are very easy to be interviewed by, because you can almost like kind of like a nod and a wink, kind of, yeah, you know what I mean. Oh, of course, I know how, you know how to do that, and that kind of thing. So I think AI interviews could be very important, because I think that once you take human bias out of it, and there is human bias, we know that years as a recruiter, a third party recruiter, and it's kind of like when you're trying to get feedback, and it's a no, and every box has been ticked in the interview, and what they're trying to say is, I just didn't like the look of him, I just didn't, something about the way that he sat there with his legs crossed, I just thought, he put me off, and that kind of thing. So if we can take that kind of human bias out of it, then I think, we could get better matches. So I think that, it's, I can see a point. I mean, I'd be surprised if it's ending this quickly. But I think that I can see why people think that it's something that might be ending. But no, I don't. Personally, for me, no, it's not ending. It's kind of trending, but it's not ending.
Yeah, I've had quite a few case studies around different types of virtual and AI interviews on my podcast, and the positives around it are always really, really interesting. And I say it's like speed, it's transparency. In a lot of cases, this technology is being deployed so humans can get to you can get to a human quicker and actually have a better experience further down the line. So, for example, I got a case study from a deco in Belgium, I think it is, who are using, agents to do a kind of initial screening to collect essential data about driving licenses and rights to work, and basic questions and those kind of things. Which means by the time a human gets involved, the human can have a much higher quality conversation with the candidate, because they're not having to go through all of this, all of this kind of tedious detail. The other interesting thing about that process is you can opt out of it. You can opt to talk to a human if you want to, which is again interesting. I'll maybe come back to that a little bit later. And then the rest of them have all been around, really sort of improving the experience. And I guess that, obviously I've been talking to these are case studies. These are vendors trying to do a really good job, or at least have a great case study around it. There obviously could be lots of kind of unscrupulous uses for this, or poor implementations of it, where it just feels, it feels really bad. And I kind of, I think that's a real danger. But also I think one of the other issues is, as an industry, we're doing a terrible job on the PR of this. We are doing a terrible job at telling people why this is a good idea, and what the benefits are, because it's just kind of not out there. So I think you tend to get a lot of negative media coverage. It's like, oh, AI is now interviewing people and choosing people and making selections, and the computer says no, and everything's dehumanized, and I want to talk to a human being. And I just think the PR effort is terrible. But I think the reason behind that is, in order to really sell the advantages of an AI interview, as an industry, we've got to go out there and tell how bad the recruiting process is, how bad humans are at interviewing people. You have bias, you have processes that take forever. All of the things that we know as kind of insiders within this that are terrible about interview processes. I suppose it's kind of difficult to go out there and say, actually, this is what we do at the moment is awful, and AI can make it better. But that's kind of the real message, because I think that, reading some of the Reddit comments about, I want to talk to a human, I want all this sort of stuff. It's like, if there was an alternative reality with the volume of applications that are out there at the moment, the mismatch of people looking for work and the number of jobs available, if there was an alternative reality where a human recruiter can interview everyone, give everyone feedback, give everyone a brilliant kind of experience, then we want to do that. But that's not possible. And to me, I think this is a great way it's a great sort of, it's a great alternative. It maximizes what the humans do, and it leans on technology to do what technology does best, and hopefully it gives the candidate a much better experience than the one they're getting right now. What do you think?
No, I agree 100%. And I think as well, it's we're also evolving into this area of almost tasks, not jobs. And if you are assessing somebody for their ability to do specific tasks, then I don't know a human is the best person to do that, because we have, as I said earlier, too many biases. It's also, do I really want to work with this person? Can I see this person fitting in? And whereas what we're really looking to do is kind of, can this person do what I need them to do? And the answer is usually yes, and keeping any bias out of it. So I think that as I said, I don't think virtual recruiter interviews are ending. If anything, I think they're becoming more and more prevalent.
And as I say, we will see some bad ones.
Yeah.
Just poor implementations, bad technology, bad actors, all those kind of things, and that's just a kind of inevitable for something that happens at this scale. But I think the one of the key messages that I would kind of urge people deploying or building these systems to think about is the candidate experience is the most important thing here. Just because we're automating something, it doesn't mean we stop thinking about the candidate experience. And I think putting the candidate experience first when you're designing and implementing these kind of services is crucial. But let's really lean into what technology can do that humans can't do. So that kind of mass personalization, giving people the feedback that they want, even changing the assessment from person to person, the possibilities and the things that you can do with the technology that you can't do with humans. Let's do that. So people are in a position where they're like, wow, I used to have to, in the same way we always say, we used to have to like type out a letter and put it in an envelope and put it in the post, but now we just click a button. And let's get to that. Let's get to that point.
Yeah, no, I agree. As I said, humans have biases. They're kind of, it's endemic. And I think that, if we are assessing people purely for skills or capabilities and relevant to a task or a job, and things are becoming, I suppose, more task related as opposed to job related, then that's all we need to know. And, it's this kind of, the old kind of like, can I see myself sitting in a room with this person all day? Not really. Where, AI doesn't care about that. AI says this person can do that really quickly and effectively.
And also that kind of right balance between humans and machines is important. And it's probably different for different industries and different types of job as well. There isn't a universal one size fits all here, which I think some people are looking for, which is just not the case. And again, I really heard a really interesting example from there's a company called 11 Labs, who are a voice cloning AI system, basically. And what they've done for their own recruitment is they've cloned their recruiters' voices. But what those recruiters do is, what they use that technology for is to answer candidates' questions. So they don't actually use those people to interview the candidates, because it's quite high touch, low volume, high skill recruitment. But the candidate can talk to a cloned voice version of the recruiter just to answer loads of questions and get loads of information, again, to make the interview experience better. So again, I think we'll see different variations of that kind of machine human split.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. So final question on this, would you be comfortable being interviewed by AI? First question. If it's yes, because I think you're going to say yes, otherwise you'd say this was ending. Would you prefer a text-based AI, a video of a fake human or a cloned human, or a voice-based system? What would your preference be?
Personally, I would say text-based.
Cool.
I'm doing, I'm doing a market research thing at the moment. Nothing to do with work or the world of work or anything to do with any of this. But everything is being done in that way, with text questions and answers. For me, it's working fine.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I wonder whether there'll be a generation split or how that will pan out. But that's probably a discussion for another day. So, Mervyn, thank you so much for joining me throughout the show.
Been a pleasure.
Brings us to the, and we will be convening later in the week because we are doing a LinkedIn live around my podcast, around the roundup episode of my podcast. So watch out for some stuff promoting that. Anyway, that brings us to the end of yet another show. So my thanks to Mervyn, thanks to the brilliant guest, thanks to Alan, our producer, as ever, for holding the whole show together. There are a ton of other brilliant shows on Purple Acorn, including Rona's show, Work Influencer, and the show that Mervyn does with Danielle from X to Z. We've also got From the Desk, My First Job, and so many more. So head over to the website, or even better, head over to the Purple Acorn LinkedIn page and give it a follow. And then you can see all these shows as they go out live. You can also find all the Purple Acorn shows and this show as a podcast on Spotify, on Apple, or wherever else you listen to your quality podcasts. My longer form interviews are available on recruitingfuture.com and also wherever you listen to your quality podcasts. And while you're there, make sure you listen to the Alder Hour as well. So we will be back next week. I'm already looking forward to it. This is Matt Alder, clocking out.